Hi, my name is Calvin Lin, and I want to talk about my thinking like a historian, cause and effect. So first, what had caused change in my topic, which is segregation. Um, the first thing that was a major turning point was the removal of federal troops in 1877, which occurred in the South, where the government thought that there was equality on both sides of race, so that they were able to remove the federal troops that enforced the law, which all races were equal. The second was that there were still many white citizens that believed that they were the superior race in the US that caused this change, where there would be discrimination between the two races. Who supported change? Um, it's mainly the white superior citizens that supported this change, as they thought that by doing this or by promoting segregation, that they were able to better increase their own value, and also some of the farm or business owners, as they would be able to receive more slaves and more handwork. The people that didn't support this change were the minorities that were affected, such as those who were kidnapped, stolen, and sold as slaves, and also others, such as other white citizens who didn't believe in segregation and believed that all races were equal, did not support this. Intended effects of this change, which was the removal of federal troops in 1877, were that there were none intended effects. Everything had gone south, as they believed that their country was able to move on and advance towards a more peaceful and right society. Accidental effects includes the division of race, and also the division of their country in terms of race, but it also reintroduced major slavery, as slavery is on the decline before this event had happened, and also the loss of minority rights, such as African Americans and Asians who had started to begin to be able to vote, and it also led to um, them receiving lesser jobs and lesser social looks. The brutality of people also increased as an accidental effect, as people thought um, lynching and killing or torturing was right, as those white citizens believed they were better. But another effect that was positive in a minor way was the subunification of different races. For long-term effects, some long-term effects include the loss of minority rights, lynching and killing of African Americans or Asians, and also segregation. Um, Another one is also slavery, as it was enlongened due to um, due to the removal and the segregation in 1877. A short term would be uh, there are no short term, but slavery could count as one of them, as it had a shorter timeline than the rest of the intended effects. For change in continuity, what has changed? There is more unification and anti segregation now than before. There also is more equality in terms of rights and social equality. Who had benefited from this change? Many of the politicians and the public in general has benefited from this change, as we now have a better understanding as to the equality and what it means for every single person who is involved. Who hasn't benefited from this change? Many of the minorities are still affected from the past, and many of the minorities still are based off of stereotypes that were established from the past. What has remained the same? There still are a few citizens that believe that they are more superior than other races, and something else that has remained the same is the stereotypes of minorities, such as how African American people or Asians are below or are supposed to be working under white citizens, and also more harsher and social financial situations for minorities, such as um, they will be more judged and more strictly uh, looked at than other people. So for turning points, my first question is how did past decisions or actions affect future choices? I have two main questions which talks about my topic of racial injustice from the past. The first is pulling of the federal troops in 1877 from the South, which reintroduced and emphasized segregation in the South. And the second is the lynching of Emmett Till in 1955, which was a major case of injustice of a young boy from Chicago against a white woman. In history, my major turning points from 1619, which was the first introduction of slaves in the US, to current times, which is in 2018, I'd include some major turning points that have affected or have somehow been connected to racial injustice. The first is in 1857, where the Supreme Court ruled that Black Americans were not citizens and could not sue within the U.S. The second is in 1877, which is also this, where federal troops are pulled from the South. The third is 1889, where a young black man is put on trial for scaring a young white girl. This is one of the first cases of racial injustice where this young black man was killed due to the fact that it was his word against another white woman's. The fourth is in 1896, which is called the Homer Plessy trial. This is one of the more major trials where this trial was pulled into. Um, this trial was talked about when Homer Plessy, an African American, was sitting in first class carriage when a white man wanted to get on, but there was no more seats, and he had refused to give up his seat. Thus, the court had ruled that um, white men had better or more privilege over black. And in 1955, which was this, it was the lynching of Emmett Till, who was a boy from Chicago in Mississippi and had allegedly uh, whistled at a white woman and was killed and lynched. In 1965, it was a Selma March led by Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and these are my turning points. In using the past, how does the past help us make sense of the present? The past shows the problems that many minorities had to face and how they were influenced. This influence was carried throughout history to the present, where traces of it is still shown in our society. How is the past similar to the present? The past is similar to the present in terms of racial discrimination and stereotypes. The past is similar to the present due to the marginalization of race, which led to an after effect of stereotypes and continued discrimination. How is the past different from the present? It has less racial discrimination and more equality and social justice, which means that there would be less cases such as the Homer Plessy trial where it is one man's word against another's. Through their eyes, how did people in the past view their world? People in the past had viewed their time period as more disruptive. From different perspectives, there were different opinions as to the situation at that time, and also the enjoyment of the past. From the perspective of the majority of the minorities, or African slaves, the time was brutal and unfair. But on the other hand, the perspective of the white owners and citizens, the time seemed a bit more normal, but still as harsh as they had to work much more. How did their worldview affect their choices and actions? People in the past had different beliefs than today. It is shown through their actions. For example, in the past, people had thought that the norm would be the oppression of African Americans and other minorities, such that they would try not to step in and try to help. How did their world affect their choices and actions? People in the past had different beliefs than today. It is shown through their actions from the past. For example, in the past, people had believed or thought that the norm would be the depression of African Americans, such that when they see one of the African Americans or slaves in distress or in need of help, they would usually not step in and not help as they believed that that was the norm at that period of time.